Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's John Deere Classic. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure. But first off, look at the golf course and my modeling and key stats that I'm using to identify my top plays. And then afterwards, we're gonna try and run it back on top of what was a big week last week with some of our exposure as well. So we'll go through some core plays for DFS, players towards the top that I'm getting well over the field on, as well as a few value plays towards the bottom that I'm using to save some salary, and also 4 outright bets that I've already added to the mix. So by the end, you'll have a good idea of how to get your research started, as well as with a few ideas of potential plays that you might want to get over the field on as well. So without further ado, we've got a lot to touch on here. Let's first off start with our modeling and exactly what we're looking for in our plays. I've got a full course breakdown already up on the YouTube, so check out the description for a link to that. But this golf course is a birdie fest just like we had at the Rocket Classic. It's not overly long. You don't have to be a bomber, unlike the Rocket Classic, to win this kind of thing. So I would say a little bit more wide open, but a lot of the same kind of scoring stats that we were looking at are going to be the same thing this time around. So your approach profile, a lot of shots from 175 and in, so some extra emphasis with these top 3 buckets. Number 2 key stat is birdie or better percentage, so looking for players with the firepower to get to something that's at least 20 under par. That's usually what wins this thing. Putting stats important at a birdie fest, also bent grass, that is the type of surface that we have this week. Off the tee skews a little bit more towards accuracy than distance, as only one of the par 5s you'd really have to have length to reach into, and then even the drivable par 4s around here tend to play downhill. So if you're an average length player, you're gonna be totally fine around Deere Run. So I'm looking at shots gained in birdie fest courses with at least a scoring average of minus 1.75. Around the green is in the model, but it's at the very bottom, not that important. And then our comp courses would be last week's Rocket Classic, the 3M Open, which will be playing in a few weeks, and the Truist Championship, which is at Philly Cricket Club this year, which is a short, more positional birdie fest that they played. So overall, we're looking for players who can get to something like 20 plus under par. Aggressive players would be the main thing that you should be looking for, but also players that can fill it up with the putter and that are dialed in from 175 and less. So for the full course breakdown, for an exact idea of the shots required, make sure to check out the course breakdown for that. But now that we have an idea of exactly how this golf course is going to play, let's translate that into some of our top pieces of exposure. Our first play is probably going to be the most ugly, but also the one that gives us the biggest potential game theory edge, and that is going to be on a Sungjae Im, who I bet to win at 30 to 1, not the best number. Of course, I only have Hard Rock bet to deal with, so same thing with the second bet here. Could be a little bit better if you can line shop it, but Sungjae Im, this is a perfect bounce back spot for. And if you take a look at the modeling, you can see why I called him an ugly play. He's number 108 in my total model ranking. Bottom 40, bottom 50 in the field is not what you want to see from a $9,200 golfer, but I know even on a Monday that hardly anyone is going to want to use him in lineups. So if you're looking to get different towards the top end of the board, he's going to be one of the few players that you can do that with. And if we just take a 50,000 foot view, take a step back and take a look at the talent level of these top level players, Sungjae Im is arguably the best player that we have in this field. And I think if you went a year ago, he would be undoubtedly the most talented player that we have in this field. And now he's cheaper, only $9,200, potentially going to be around 10% even lower ownership in those large field GPPs. I know it's an ugly play. The form is nasty for a reason, but I've seen guys bounce back and win before. So 30 to 1, I took a shot on that sort of number. But I think the even better spot to deploy him on a week like this would be in DFS, where you're playing against the rest of the field, right? And if no one else wants to have the confidence to get to his Sungjae Im and his long-term talent level, then I'll be somebody that tries to get him early, because the last 12 measured rounds, it's really been one category holding him back. The putter can be a little bit better. Bent grass is a good surface for Sungjae Im, but it's been the iron play, and it hasn't even just been the last 12 measured rounds. Even if we zoom out more to the last 24 measured rounds, the other 3 categories are now into the positive, including that putter now gaining over that 24 round sample, but still losing about a stroke per round with the irons. And the one thing I'll say about this course is that it is one of the easiest ball striking tests that we have the entire year. It tends to be extremely soft this time of year. Also, not a lot of wind on this part of the schedule. So Sungjae Im, used to playing in signature field events, major championships, week in and week out, it's safe to say that he's used to playing in much stronger fields than what we have this week. In fact, he's hardly played in any of the regular tour events in 2025. He's almost exclusively played in the events against the world's best players. And And I said the same thing about Victor Hovland before he went at the Valspar, that when you take a guy like Sungjae, who's clearly a better player than everyone else this week, and you put him in a field where he is that alpha dog, sometimes you see those guys return to their prior form. And, it makes a lot of sense. When you're playing against the world's best players, it is a harder job to go out there and gain strokes to the field. And sure, losing a stroke per round with the irons is completely giving away the rest of the work that he's been doing. But in a field like this, maybe his baseline's closer to like a half a stroke lost, or even closer to maybe a neutral in a weaker field like this, let alone the upside if he were to go out there and improve and fix the iron play, because historically, Sungjae Im's one of the best iron players that we've had on tour. So this is a shot in the dark. It is a risky play, but in large field GPPs, a 150 maxer like myself has to find spots to leverage against the rest of the field and the rest of the public out there, and that is going to be one of the players that I'm using to do so with the Sungjae Im. So $9,200 I thought was a more than fair enough price tag. If we're looking at course fit, he's a good bent grass putter, typically really good with the short to mid irons, and he's a high birdie percentage player, most players on tour. Now, take a look at 2025, it's not so much the case because this has been by far the worst season that he's ever had, but I'm always a believer that, class is permanent, form is temporary. You're going to have, lulls, you're going to have upswings in your career as well, like you see with a Ben Griffin right now, but over the long period of 3 to 4 years, 5-year, 10-year sample sizes, these players that are some of the more talented on tour are going to play up to their baseline. So I'm expecting a bounce back at some point, and if it happens this week, I'm going to be real happy at that low ownership. Next play is going to be Luke Clanton at $8,700, who's a little bit more of a traditional play, playing a lot better golf over his last few starts, and he's $8,700, which I thought was a very cheap price tag in this kind of field. In fact, so cheap that I bet him to win at 30-1. And when you take a look at the recent form metrics, like I said, a whole lot better than we had with Sungjae. He's gaining with his approach play. He's actually losing in the 2 short game categories. But if we zoom out a little bit more, you can see that it improves rather drastically. He's gaining in both the ball striking categories. Short game can be a little bit hit or miss, but on the bent grass surface, in his small sample size for his career, it has been by far the best surface for him. So you can see that evidenced with his performance here last year. He, of course, nearly won this event as an amateur, so that T2 finish is something that you can't ignore. It's worth noting with Sungjae is that he's played this event a few times over the last few years. Last year had that T12. He's also pretty comfortable around this golf course. There's something to be said about agronomy, the type of greens that they have here. Luke Clanton had that familiarity right off the bat at TPC Deere Run, and at 30-1, he's got the upside to actually win this thing. And I will say the vast majority of my bets this week are going to be long shots. When we're at a birdie fest, when we're at a golf course that introduces variance like a TPC Deere Run does, I usually don't want to bet guys that are like 15 to 20-1. So that's why with my shots towards the top end of the board for DFS and from the outright angle, I took some shots in the dark. Like nobody else is going to be betting Sungjae this week. Luke Clanton, right, might even be a little bit early for him to punch that kind of an outright ticket, but this is one of those golf courses where almost the whole field is viable to win on a week like this. So you want to embrace that variance, you want to embrace that chaos as much as humanly possible. Before we go through our value plays and a few of the long shots towards the bottom end of the board, just want to remind you guys where you guys can find access to these spreadsheets, which of course would be on my Patreon page, where you can find these completely uncensored. That includes recent form for every single player in the field over their last 7-8 events. You got event history as well for around TPC Deere Run, shots gained metrics over the last 24 and last 12 measured rounds, and of course, all my model weightings to the right side of the model, so you guys can get a really good idea of exactly my perspective for any given event, modeling projections and my player pool and every single bet that I'm taking for all these golf tournaments over there on my Patreon page. And that's not only just for the main slate, but also for showdown and rounds 2 through 4. I have projection sheets for all of those and bets and matchups for all of those too. So make sure to check out the Patreon page if you guys haven't already for all of the extra content and to help support the channel a little bit too. But our next play is going to be our first value of the week, and that's going to be a Jacob Bridgeman at $7,500. And this is what I mean by a long shot that could win this thing. He's 60-1 on Hard Rock. I did boost that to 66-1, and he's the sort of player that fits this golf course to a T. A great bent grass putter, one of the better putters on the surface that we have in the field. A high birdie percentage player. Last year was top 25 in birdie or better percentage. This year, a well above average in the category category, and that's despite playing on a lot of the harder events, majors, also signature field events for the very first time. He's a player that can go low, is not afraid to go low, and has the kind of putter at a birdie fest to potentially win this sort of thing. So if you go to the last 24 rounds, and keep in mind, he's playing in much stronger field events than a vast majority of this field. Ball striking has been a bit suspect, but great putter as we've already outlined. You go to the last 12 measured rounds, and especially last week, he really started to turn around the ball striking, but you can see over the last 12 round sample size, he's gaining with the iron play, still flushing the putter, just making everything out there as he typically does. And you usually play him at golf courses that off the tee are a little bit softer, where you don't have to be a bomber, you don't have to hit the ball long and straight. He tends to hit the foul ball quite often. And the John Deere Classic, ideally you do want guys that are more accurate than most, but off the tee play is the third, maybe even fourth key stat that you'll be looking at. It's not number 1 and 2 like we see for a lot of the harder golf courses on tour, which is why Bridgeman, at least in my opinion, I mentioned this last week on the Wednesday live stream, has kind of struggled in the signature field events. He doesn't fit those golf courses as well. Where he does fit, though, are in birdie fests like what we have this week. So give me him at 66 to 1. He's been in contention a handful of times this year in stronger fields and in golf courses that don't fit his game nearly as much as what I see for this week. In the event history, I don't think is that substantial. Again, he's a relatively new face on the PGA Tour, did miss the cut here in 2024, but hopefully that keeps the ownership a little bit lower. And because the form is just finally starting to come around, a lot of the shots gained metrics paint a picture of him playing a lot worse than he is in reality. I don't think he's going to be a popular play in this range. So just like a Sungjae, if we're trying to get a little bit different with the game theory side of things on the DFS side, Bridgeman could be an option for that. I'm not expecting him to be like 1-2% owned, but something in that 5-6% range is probably about the max ownership I'd expect him to come in at, which means if you use him in 12 to 15% of your lineups, that you're getting some good leverage right there. So a Bridgeman, the kind of player that I'll be getting over the field on, both for DFS and of course from the outright angle as we mentioned. And then the last play we're going to go through this week, our fourth outright that I've already mixed in. Of course, there will be plenty of other guys I'm playing, plenty of other bets I'm mixing in too. That's what the Patreon page is for. But Matt McCarty at 82.5 to 1, and he's $7,200 in DFS. And if you guys have been following the channel for the last 6 or so months, you'll know that I'm extremely high on this kid. I expect him to be a superstar out here. I mean, winning 3 times on the Korn Ferry Tour in a short span of time is nothing to scoff at. Even more so winning your first real PGA Tour event. I think it was his second actual start, but the first start after getting full status wins at the Black Desert Championship. This guy is going to be around for a very long time. And on the bent grass surface, just like Jacob Bridgeman, is a massive gainer, gaining 0.69 shots gained per round. Nice, by the way. And also a player last week who was in contention because his ball striking finally came around. Days 1 and 2, it was more so the putting that was leading the way, but rounds 3 and 4, he was at least respectable in the ball striking categories. And just like a Bridgeman too, he tends to struggle at courses that are a little bit more off the tee heavy. McCarty isn't the longest off the tee, and he tends to struggle at some of those golf courses too. Like, you wouldn't bet him to win like a Farmers Insurance Open. You wouldn't bet him to win like an API at this stage. Maybe he'll become a better off the tee player, and eventually we can consider him at those sort of golf courses. But you know the kind of golf courses that you do want to play him at? Birdie Fest where the putter absolutely matters, and that is what we're getting with a Matt McCarty this week. Last 12 measured rounds, kind of like Bridgeman, he plays in a lot of the big time fields too, because even in the majors, right, he's earned himself into those because of the wins. And sure, the ball striking stats kind of struggle as a result, but we're getting this putting first player that you want at Birdie Fest. So if we go to the last 24 rounds, zoom out a little bit more, approach plays at least into the positive, just like it was with Jacob Bridgeman too. So, if there's one of those ball striking categories that we need into the positive, it would be that iron play. And sure, off the tee play, neither player's strength, but that's not what you have to have around this golf course. If anything, it's more so about the accuracy. McCarty can hit some fairways. Bridgeman, maybe not so much. He's pretty crappy at the off the tee play, but this fits McCarty's skill set to a T. And the fact that I was able to get him at 75 to 1 and boost that 10% to 82.5, I thought was completely disrespectful given the kind of pedigree that he's already shown us on tour. So just a few examples of the players that I'll be getting over the field on, but the far more important aspect of these videos, guys, is not just the plays, right? Picks and plays that you're going to see on a lot of pieces of content out there. It's the process behind it, what I'm looking for in my plays. The fact that you have to account for field strength when you're looking at somebody like a Bridgeman or McCarty that has earned themselves into much stronger field events than some of the other players around them. I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but there are guys here where their form looks a lot better than it probably should because they're playing in alternate field events. They're playing in only the slapdick fields that they get into. And the models, a lot of the shots gain metrics, which do help us. You know, I'm a stat guy, stat nerd, as we say, self-proclaimed one on the channel. It can throw the stat nerds off a little bit. So, you know, knowing ball to some extent, knowing field strength, accounting for that, something that you're always going to see from me here on the channel. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also, comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament for a chance to earn a free month of my Patreon page. And as long as they are at least 30-1 to win, check out the sports books before you go ahead and guess. You will win a free month access to all of those projections and modeling. So go ahead, claim your player down below before anyone else goes out there and steals them from you. Best of luck with the giveaway. Also, any exposure that you guys are getting to as well, and stop on by for all the live streams throughout the weekend, getting you ready for rounds 2 through 4. But not only have our Wednesday live streams, as a lot of you guys know about, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll be on the Ship It Nation YouTube talking about all things DFS over there. 8 p.m. Eastern time, that'll be on my YouTube channel. We'll be doing the prop and betting side on Wednesday. But rounds 2 through 4, we have you covered for Showdown and on the prop and betting side of things for the entire event, right? Something that kind of, you know, makes this channel unique compared to a lot of the other ones that you might see out there is that we don't leave you hanging when you get to the weekend. Every single round is covered in full detail, just like you see here before the event, if not even more detail, because we have the shots gain metrics to go through as well. So subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that content when it goes live. Join the Patreon page for all of those projections and modeling that I was talking about before, and let's have ourselves a week.